to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump campaigned in Ohio Thursday and announced he will accept the results of the November's election, under one condition.
I want to make a major announcement today. I would like to promise and pledge to all of my voters and supporters, and to all of the people of the United States, that I will totally accept the results of this great and historic presidential election if I win.
Donald Trump's remarks come one day after the final presidential debate, when he refused to say if he'll accept the election results. President Obama and other political leaders have sharply criticized Trump's remarks.
That is dangerous. Because when you try to sow the seeds of doubt in people's minds about the legitimacy of our elections, that undermines our democracy.
On Thursday night, Trump and Hillary Clinton both spoke here in New York at the Alfred Smith Memorial Foundation dinner in New York to raise money for Catholic charities. Trump was repeatedly heckled and booed during the event.
We've learned so much from WikiLeaks. For example, Hillary believes that it's vital to deceive the people by having one public policy and a totally different policy in private. That's okay. I don't know who they're angry at, Hillary, you're right. For example, here she is tonight in public pretending not to hate Catholics.
Hillary Clinton poked fun at Trump's claim he might not accept the result of the November election.
You know, come to think of it, it's amazing I'm up here after Donald. I didn't think he'd be okay with a peaceful transition of power.
The two candidates sat at the same table during the dinner, separated only by Cardinal Timothy Dolan, the Archbishop of New York. In other campaign news, a 10th woman has come forward to say she was sexually assaulted by Donald Trump. Corona, Virginia said Trump approached her in 1998 outside the U.S. Open tennis tournament and grabbed her breast. Virginia said after she initially flinched, Trump remarked, "Don't you know who I am?" Virginia spoke out on Thursday with a message to the Republican nominee.
Your random moment of sexual pleasure came at my expense and affected me greatly. Mr. Trump revealed his true character in his own words on tape, which indicated that he felt entitled to grab women by their private parts.
In news from Iraq, at least 16 people have died after ISIS militants attacked a power station in the oil-rich city of Kirkuk. This came as U.S.-backed forces continued their assault on Mosul, which fell to the Islamic State 2 years ago. The United Nations has warned the attack on Mosul could force up to 1 million people to be displaced. On Thursday, the Pentagon announced the first U.S. soldier had died in the attempt to retake Mosul. The top United Nations human rights official has said the siege and bombing of eastern Aleppo in Syria has constituted crimes of historic proportions. Zedrad al-Hussein spoke earlier today during a special session of the UN Human Rights Council.
Armed opposition groups continue to fire mortars and other projectiles into civilian neighborhoods of western Aleppo, but indiscriminate airstrikes across the eastern part of the city by government forces and their allies are responsible for the overwhelming majority of civilian casualties. And these violations constitute war crimes, and if knowingly committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against civilians, they constitute crimes against humanity.
South Africa has begun the formal process to withdraw from the International Criminal Court. The news comes just 2 days after another African nation, Burundi, became the first country to ever pull out of the court. Over the years, the court's been accused of disproportionately targeting African leaders. Human Rights Watch criticized South Africa's move. The group said, quote, South Africa's proposed withdrawal from the International Criminal Court shows startling disregard for justice from a country long seen as a global leader on accountability for victims of the gravest crimes. Philippines. In news from Latin America, Honduran security forces fired water cannons and tear gas at protesters Thursday in the Honduran capital of Tegucigalpa. The protest was led by COPING, the Civic Council of Popular Indigenous Organizations of Honduras. The leader of COPING, Berta Cáceres, was assassinated in March. Thursday's protest came just 2 days after 2 Honduran campesino leaders were also assassinated. Tensions escalating between Washington and Manila after recently elected Filipino President Rodrigo Duterte announced what he described as a separation from the United States and realignment with Beijing.
America has lost me, and will I realign myself in your ideological flow, and maybe I will also go to Russia to talk to Putin and tell him that there are 3 of us against the world: China, Philippines, and Russia. It's the only way.
The Philippines is a former U.S. colony and longtime military ally. Meanwhile, in other news from the Philippines, dozens of protesters were injured during a demonstration Wednesday outside the U.S. Embassy in Manila when a police van repeatedly rammed into the crowd. The protesters were calling for an end to the U.S. military presence in the Philippines. For the first time in 2 decades, a new nuclear reactor has gone online in the United States. The Tennessee Valley Authority announced Watts Bar Unit 2 began generating energy on Wednesday. Construction on the $4.7 billion reactor began in 1973. 4 other reactors are being constructed in Georgia. In Rhode Island, 2 activists from a group called the Fang Collective were arrested Thursday when they chained themselves to a concrete device inside a TD Bank in Providence to protest the bank's financial support of the Dakota Access Pipeline. Federal prosecutors have announced they plan to charge a former National Security Agency contractor with violating the Espionage Act in what's been described as the largest theft of classified government material ever. Prosecutors accuse Harold Thomas Martin, an employee of Booz Allen Hamilton, of stealing classified material from the NSA over a 20-year period, but there's no evidence he shared the information. Martin is scheduled to appear in court today. A new report from the Environmental Protection Agency's Inspector General has concluded the agency took 7 months longer than necessary to warn residents of Flint, Michigan about lead contamination in the water. The report found the EPA had enough information in June 2015 to issue an emergency order under the Safe Drinking Water Act, but the agency did not act until January of 2016. Flint's lead poisoning began when an unelected emergency manager appointed by Michigan Governor Rick Snyder switched the source of Flint's drinking water to the corrosive Flint River in 2014. And Britain has announced it will pardon up to 15,000 gay and bisexual men who are convicted under old laws that criminalized homosexuality. The pardons are being done under the so-called Turing Law, named after Alan Turing, who cracked Nazi Germany's unbreakable Enigma code, but was latest prosecuted for being gay. He committed suicide in 1954 at the age of 41. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And